go back, sorry. Let's go back to our install Dspace step 1. Okay, so we've completed that. We've remotely logged in, so it's the next step. The next step is to get Dspace. The current stable version is 5.5. We just type that, which means go to the current change directory. If you just change the CD like that, it takes you to your home folder. As you see, we are now in home Dspace, which is where we want to be. And if you want to clear clutter from the screen, you just type clear and press enter like this. And there we go, nice clear screen again. Okay, so to get, I've conveniently uploaded the active versions of Dspace onto my library web server. So all you have to do is copy this, yeah, like that, and copy that, and then paste it into the screen here and press enter. And there we go, it's downloading the latest version of Ubuntu. So, and also here I've made some notes. Before continuing, we should always check the release notes, check the Dspace support page. We tried to stay we did stay one version behind, but we're now at the latest version. Also check out a list of repository software, and if you're using GitHub, check out the GitHub commands if you want to use GitHub to get the latest software. Okay, so carrying on now to the next step, we need now to unpack that software. So as it says here, replace all instances of XXX with the Dspace version you selected. So we copy that, select it and copy it, and then we paste it in here, and then we change the XXX as the instructions say to the version. So we type 5.5 and then we press hit enter, and there it's extracting the software. And to show you, we type ls-l and you'll see there's the folder with the software in it now. There's the folder with the software, and there's the source code. Alright, step 2 is then to create a link to the source code, and to make sure that the link points to this path, the source path, and it creates this path to get to the source code. This is very convenient for the documentation. So if this version here changes, you just change the source link, and you'll still have your documentation will still be current if you use this as the path to the source. So you don't have to change your documentation everywhere when a new Dspace version is released. You just tell them in one place to change this link here. So let's create that link. Just make sure we're in the home folder. We go like that, just to make sure we're in the home folder, just to be doubly sure. And then we type this, and then we change the XXX to the version of Dspace used. So here we change that XXX to 5.5. We're going to point it to 5.5 source code. Okay, now if we do a listing again, ls-l long listing, we see now that that source points to the latest version of Dspace. So now we can always refer to that source in our documentation to point to that link, which makes setting up the documentation upgrades extremely more simplified and streamlined. If you want to know more about symbolic links, is what we call a command creating a symbolic link, there's the more information about creating symbolic links. A very powerful trick is to do that symbolic link. Alright, so we've done that one. What's the next step? Right, now we need to edit the Dspace configuration for the version of Dspace. The configuration files have changed radically between version 3 and versions 4 and 5, and will change again in version 6. In version 5, the config file, the main config file now, is called the build properties file. There's still the Dspace config file, but the one to build the initial Dspace and to rebuild the Dspace is the build properties file, which is much simpler, has a lot less parameters in it. Things to be careful of when modifying this file is not to comment out any settings. Do not comment out any settings. Leave them as they are, with blanks. And then, very important, is to make sure that you correctly specify the installation directory. As I said before, we never install software in the top level folder. We always install software in the previous folder. So we're going to install our software in home Dspace so that we can use the $home variable in documentation and in scripts and everything. Makes the system administration a lot more simple, a lot more stable. Yeah, so I'm just repeating that with the release of Dspace, we have a new, with the versions of Dspace 3 and up, the new configuration config elements are involved. So please read that and take note. Alright, and here's an example build properties file. So here's that critical install parameter, directory install dir, and here's the critical hostname part, and then again most of the stuff's critical. So anything here with percent sign enclosed by percent signs is something that you need to set up. Okay, so let's go ahead and configure build properties for our virtual machine. So we copy that, paste it in here, enter. So now we into the config file. So we go down here and we want to do the all important install directory. Just clean this up, create spaces. So install directory there is /home Dspace. Because we're using a virtual machine and the local host is not going to work, we're going to just use the virtual machine's IP address for the host name at the moment. But remember, you must use the host name that you negotiated with the campus administrator and what you've negotiated with the repository manager, the very important persistent host name. So there we're just going to use the IP address because we're going to talk to a local VirtualBox virtual machine. And then the base URL, we've eliminated the 8080 because we're going by to the default port 80, so we don't have to specify it. So we have a nice clean simple URL to use, and again we're just going to specify the IP address. The URL includes the protocol and the IP address. That's what a URL means. It includes the protocol and this IP address here. Okay, we're going to leave that as it is. The Dspace user interface is the XML user interface, and we're not going to use that parameter because here we're just going to make the URL here again point to the base URL, and so we keep everything very simple. So we're going to eliminate this / here, and we just go to that / there and take that out, leave it there. So there it's very simple. Dspace URL points to the Dspace base URL there, this base URL here. Very simple. Dspace name, we're just going to leave that as it is. You can give it some name. Here the solar server, very important for Dspace. Again, we're going to remove the port 80 because we've set our server to listen on port 80, not port 8080. And again, because localhost won't work with a virtual machine, we're going to point it to 192 to the IP address .2.7. Okay, and for us in South Africa, we're going to use the ZA, South Africa language. Then we come to the important Dspace configuration, database configuration. And remember earlier on, we installed the PostgreSQL server and created all the Dspace database credentials. And that is the password for us. That's the username and the password to connect to the database. We can leave the rest as it is. It can be changed later on when you're doing performance optimization. Right, our mail server on our campus, the mail delivery server is mail.sun, so let's just leave that as it is there. If you need any username and password to connect to the mail server, you must use that. If there's a special port it uses, you must change that port. And then you must put in these email parameters. On our campus we have a generic email account which we call Scholar at Sun, so this is what I've put in there. and in a feedback recipient. Okay, so what did I do? Sorry. Okay, the feedback recipient, same email address, scholar@sun.ac.za. Webmaster, again we point that to scholar@sun.ac.za. Recipient for server errors, oh, that's me, the guy who manages the server, so that's me. My email address. Now registration, we again scholar@sun.ac.za. Okay, we haven't registered the handle for the server, so we're just going to leave the handle parameters as they are, handle prefixes as they are. If you need a proxy to connect to the internet, this is a good place to put the proxy parameters in. And I'm going to leave the log level settings as they are, info, which is the default. Alright, so we finished with our build properties file. We are ready to build the Dspace application. And we save it again with nano, Control O to write it out, and then Control X to get out. Okay, so basically we are ready, should be ready now to build the Dspace application. So we go back to the step there, and now we go to the next step. Okay, just to make sure that we have the correct permissions and ownership, we run these two commands. Let's do that quickly. Always with Linux, Unix, make sure of ownership and permissions of files. Do that again. Okay, there we go. And then we do this one to give full read-write permissions to everything in the home folder, just to make things simple and make sure Tomcat can read and write to those folders. And then we want to change to the source folder to do our build. You see there, as I said, that source link, you don't have to worry about the version in the documentation, just use that. So you can see now we are inside the source folder, and we're actually inside the source code. There it is, you can see the source code. So in there we type this command, we execute this command to build. A lot of stuff will be downloaded and scroll by on the screen. It will take quite a while. If you have problems with the software and you have build problems, please go through this troubleshooting and check the troubleshooting. Okay, but for now let's try it out and paste it in, and press enter to execute the command, and we should start to see some activity as it starts building the application. Alright, I did a test build before, and the Maven code was downloaded. It took about half an hour on my internet connection. I have about a 1 megabit connection, so it took quite a while. So this build should go fairly fast. It doesn't have to download software, it just has to build the Dspace application. And there it's building classes, and then we see it's now getting to build they're building the XML user interface. There we go, XML user interface. Implementing local customizations, and now it's building the WAR file for the XML user interface. Now it's doing the JSP user interface. So this will continue for a while. So here I'm going to pause, and I'll be back when the build is finished. Okay, I'm back. The build is completed. It took 3 minutes because I've already did a previous build and downloaded the Maven software. We get a success for all the modules. So now we are ready for the next step. So let's do that. Let's go to the next step. Now we must use the ant installer. So for Dspace 5, we go there, we click there, and we type ant fresh install. You only do this once with install, and that should do the trick. If you're doing an upgrade, sorry, I made a mistake. First we're going to the installer directory. There you see I can make mistakes. I'm fallible. So let's go to the Dspace installer folder. There you see where we are now, to make sure. And there, from there, run the ant fresh install and paste it in. Okay, there we go. Now it's doing the ant build. It's creating the folders, the first time folders. It's updating the database, installing database code. And now it's copying the WAR files to home Dspace web apps. And those are the web apps that we want Tomcat to serve up later on. And as I said earlier, if this is an upgrade, you type ant update in that folder. And there's some code from the previous test build. And now it's downloading the GeoLite database, and I'll extract the GeoLite database and install it, and there we do. It's installed, and it tells you now to connect to it we must use that URL. You remember the 192.168.27. And we have a build successful, and it took less than a minute. Even on my small computer, the ant compiler, the ant installer worked very well. Okay, so please make a note of this. Very important. Now we go back to the step 6, and we go to the next step now. And this is the important one, where we create the super admin user. And there's the super admin privileges. And to be with sysadmin, we're just going to go back to our home folder, type cd. Now we're back in our home folder, there, home Dspace, and from there we're going to run this command to create the administrator, and we paste that in. Some notes: do not let any unauthorized persons have access to your Dspace admin account. This should be only for the repository manager and so forth. This is a very powerful account. With the old Dspace versions, this password is displayed on the screen, so if you're doing a demonstration installation using these instructions, be careful about typing in the password. Okay, so for this machine we're going to use my email address as the super admin, so we type that in there, and my first name is Hilton, and we type that in there. My last name is Gibson, and in the password we're going to use the same password we use for the Dspace account, so it's 09 Ubuntu 09 Ubuntu 09 to confirm, and we say yes, all of that looks good, and now we wait for it to create the administrator account. This might take a while on my slow machine, so I am going to pause until this is done, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. There the account has been created, and we get a successful creation. So what's the next step? Step 8. Okay, this is the very important step. We're going to enable the Java web apps on the Java Tomcat Web App server. Just to note, this procedure is completely different from the official Dspace documentation, in that we do not use the mod.jk, we do not use Apache port redirection, and we do not even use the Apache web server itself. Okay. So the problem is the Dspace web apps have been compiled in this location, but Tomcat only serves up web apps in this location. So how do we get the web apps from here to here safely and correctly? There are several methods, and I'm going to use what I call the automatic linkage method, so that if you change anything in that folder, it automatically changes in this folder. So that method saves you constantly copying web apps, which may incur an error after a compile. And you might do a lot of compiles if you do source code and modifications. So this will eliminate a lot of errors when you do this copy. Okay. So the requirements, as we did before, is to make sure that Tomcat is listening on port 80. So how do we actually do this? Let's click here because we're using Ubuntu 4.04. So the first step is to create the web application shortcuts in this folder. Alright, so we're going to go to this folder. There we go, and paste and hit enter. Okay, so we're in this folder. As we can see there, the present working directory, we envelop Tomcat. In here we create those links to the web apps in the home Dspace folder. So one of the most important applications we want to run is Solo, so we create that link there and we press enter, and then we create a link to the REST web API because we want that application definitely, and then we want the ORA interface for interoperability, definitely want that one, so we enter. And then we want the sort one so that you can integrate deposits with other third-party systems. Alright, so what does it look like once we've done those links? So if we type ls-l in this folder, you can see now we've got links pointing to the home Dspace app. So if anything changes in this location, it's automatically changed here because of the link pointing there. Very convenient. Okay, now we're going to get rid of this later on because that comes with the Apache Tomcat installation, that root web app, and we're going to modify that. That's a special thing. So we want to configure now the default root web app. We want to move it away from the default Tomcat root web app to our root web app. We want to make one of the root web apps one of the user interfaces, and we have standardized on the XML user interface. Okay. So the first step in making our XML user interface to the root app is to remove this default root web app from the Tomcat server. So we're going to do that quickly, and there we go. And it should have disappeared now. If we look there, the root web app is gone. Okay. Now we go. We're already in that folder. Now we create this link to point to the XML user interface for the root web app. And we paste it and we press enter. Now if we do the listing, we can see the root now points to the XML user interface app. So that is our root app. That is the one that will come up first. It won't require a /XML interface because we configured the build properties. We removed that funny /XML user interface, and Tomcat will recognize this as the root web app. Okay, so that's option A. If you want to use the new JSP user interface, you follow these procedures to make the JSP user interface the root web app. Okay, and there's a sample listing as I showed you here. And then to make that active, restart the Tomcat web app. I've included some Solo help here because the Solo application is pretty critical to the operation of Dspace. So here you can test your Solo web app after installation. I include the Solo help wherever required in the documentation. So don't worry if you can't remember where to find this. It's all over the documentation, especially when you're doing customization and configuration. Okay, so there we go. The Tomcat server restarted nicely. There's no problems. It came back with an OK on the restart. So there we have completed the very, very important linkage, or what I call the automatic linkage to all the web apps. So let's go back, step 8. Now we must look what's the next step. So we've completed this, so what is the next step? And we type cd, again good system admin practice to start from the beginning. And now we're going to test the database connection. Copy. So before we go production, we want to check that the database is good. So we do the database connection test, and we should come back successfully. We would have had problems with this when we ran the ant fresh install, because that had to connect to the database. But I'm just demonstrating that this is available, and it's a good practice to use this. So this step could actually have been performed just after the ant fresh install and before creating the administrator. I wrote up this documentation a long time ago, and it probably needs a good cleanup. Then we're going to test the schema, that the schema updates happened automatically, which is a feature with this very nice with 5.5. All the schema updates are done automatically, and this is confirmation. When you run that, it should show you that it's done all the updates from the very first version up to the latest version there. And so now we just wait for that to happen, and we should come back. It should come back with and there we go. We've got success here for all of those schema updates. So theoretically you can upgrade now from a Dspace version 1 right up to Dspace version 5, and all the database schema updates are done automatically. That's fantastic. A really great improvement with Dspace 5.5. Right, the next test we can perform is the test email. Again, email is very important for subscriptions and workflows, etc. So we just type that in there. This may not work very well because we don't have a proper host name for the machine. So we're just going to wait for it to come back with the email parameters. Okay, it came back with the correct email parameters, and we assume that it's going to happen. But on a production server with a good host name, please run this and make sure you get this coming back. The email sent successfully is returned. I'm going to interrupt this with a Control-C and get back to the command prompt. Okay, so everything looks good. We have a database connection, email's good, database upgraded properly. So now we decide what's the next step. We go for what's the next step. Well, the next step, it looks like here, is to reboot. So let's do that. Yes, you do reboot, and we wait for it to reboot. You just want to wait for the connection to get. Here we go, the connection is broken. So now I'm back on my local machine in my office, and I want to ping this machine. And when I get a ping back from it, then I'm ready to log into again from my desktop. And then when it's up, I'll show you how to track the there we go. We have a ping back from it. It says 2.2 and not 2.7. Okay, so now it's changed its IP address to 2.2. So let's see, there we've got a 2.2. Great. So now we go and log into it as 2.2. Okay, alright, let's try 2.7. Maybe that was a lie. Okay, still 2.7. Alright, so we log into it. It's Ubuntu 09. For those of you who are VirtualBox experts, if you can find a better way of doing this, please let me know. Okay, so we're back in our server, it's rebooted. If you type PS3, we can see, yeah, we have the Tomcat running, the Java Tomcat, and here we have the database running. So it looks like we have everything we need for it to run. A little tip to check the Tomcat as it starts up is to tail the log file. So we're just going to look at that, see if there were any startup parameters. So we're going to tail that file, which is the Catalina file, Catalina out file. That's the main Tomcat log file. So we see there it's still deploying at the moment, deployed the REST web apps, and it's doing some other deployment. There we go. Now it's deploying the ORA interface. On my machine this takes a couple of minutes. On a big powerful server this should happen fairly quickly. So we're just going to wait a while for everything to start up until we get the point where it says it's listening on port 80. Okay, there we go, a whole lot of stuff. Now it's deploying the Solar web app. Okay, we just wait for it. There, it's connected now to the database. We're just waiting for the Solar web app. Okay, there where that started. Okay, now when we get this information, we know now it's listening on the port 80. Type Control C to exit that, and you can type netstat -TLPN to see what's listening. And there you can see it's listening on port 80, and there's the database listening on port 5432, and there's the postfix server listening on port 25. So everything looks good. Everything looks good. It's listening on port 80. So theoretically we should be able to connect to it from our desktop now and actually see the Dspace application. So shall we try it? Let's go to another tab and we type in the full URL, HTTP. Remember the URL as an IP address at the moment because it's a VirtualBox machine, and it's listening on 2.2.7. That is the parameters we use. And if we press enter like that, we should see it connecting to our Dspace web app that we just installed. Might take a while. And there we go. Fantastic. And then to test further on, we should be able to log in with that super admin user and password. I'm just going to minimize this and maximize this so we can have a look and see. There you see. There it is, listening on a local machine. The Dspace application using the Mirage 1 theme on the XML user interface. So let's check. We need to log in as a super admin before we can hand this over to the operational team or to the librarians. And the password is 09 Ubuntu 09, and we log in. So there's my profile as the super admin, and to prove that I'm logged in there, so you can check the control panel, have a look at some Java information. It's using Java 7 on a 64-bit Linux machine. There's the Dspace configuration, Dspace 5.5, its installation directory, base URL, host name, name of site, database, etc., etc. Okay, now this person who is logged in as the super admin now can create the communities and collections and carry on with the operational maintenance of this Dspace instance. I'm going to log out now, and I'm just going to return the browser here, bring the terminal back. Right, then the next step would be post-installation, the critical post-installation task, which I will leave for another video later, but we will probably use the same VirtualBox machine. I don't want to start this all over again. But there is proof of the pudding that this works. If you are careful with the networking parameters, you can now set up a test installation of Dspace on your desktop. If you're using, you can use it if you're using Ubuntu or Windows. It should work on Windows as well. Okay, I'm just going to close that. Thank you very much, and just want to point here to the next step. So this will be the critical things you should do immediately after you've done the installation. But I'm going to leave it there and leave it for some homework for you to try it out. Okay, thank you very much and goodbye. And good luck with your installation.